To recap the Christmas Day games, get ready for the Week 17 waiver wire. Next on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome to FFT in 5. I'm Chris Towers. We got about 15 minutes left in Christmas, so to all who celebrate, Merry Christmas from me and the rest of the FFT team. I'm here to talk about the Christmas Day games and get you ready for the Week 17 waiver wire. Congratulations to everyone who is still alive and playing for a championship. Unfortunately for me, out of 15 leagues, I'm only in the championship in one. I'm trying to go for a three-peat in one of my leagues. Well, one of the trophies I've got behind me if you're watching, so I'm hoping for that. Best of luck to everyone else, and we'll get to the Week 17 waiver wire targets shortly. But first, Kansas City's offense remains an issue. This was against the Raiders. They scored 14 points on Monday afternoon. One of the worst offensive showings of the Patrick Mahomes era. I think we can say pretty easily. A couple of defensive touchdowns for the Raiders led to just a weird disjointed game where the Raiders, I think, didn't complete a pass after the first quarter in this one. I would know. I had a Devontae Adams team that ended up losing this week. And the other thing you need to know from this game is Isaiah Pacheco left with a concussion. And obviously with the shorter week with the Chiefs playing on Monday, it's going to make it more difficult for him to get cleared for Week 17. We don't know, what his status moving forward is going to be, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be someone who is worth targeting on waivers. He had 4 carries for 6 yards in this one, but was involved in the passing game, 3 catches for 42 yards. Like we know, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even when this Chiefs offense was the best in the league, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a pretty mediocre fantasy option. With the way this offense is playing right now, I think he's probably an RB2 on the low end at best for Week 17. So not someone that I necessarily will view as a must start if Isaiah Pacheco is out. Let's move on to game 2 where Giants had a chance to beat the Eagles late in this one. Tommy DeVito got benched for Tyrod Taylor, who nearly led the Giants to a comeback win. Was intercepted, I think, in the end zone right at the end of the game. Had a chance. The biggest thing for Philadelphia, I think, in this one was just Jalen Hurts continues to look not super great as a passer, but rushed for another touchdown, 300 yards. Got all 3 of the big names involved. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, that's not surprising. They've been a big part of the offense all year. But it's been a very disappointing showing for Dallas Goedert throughout the year, even when he's been healthy. But 7 catches, 71 yards on 9 targets today. That was a good sign. Whether that means you can trust him in Week 17, I think that'll depend on whether you've got someone that you feel good about. Like if you had been riding Dalton Kincaid, you probably can go with Dallas Goedert in Week 17, I would say. TJ Hawkinson, he suffered a knee injury that could be pretty serious, it sounds like. So that might be a situation where you start Dallas Goedert, but certainly not someone that you can trust for Week 17. We'll move on to the last game where the Ravens just completely dominated the 49ers. I think one of the biggest surprises of the week, maybe of the season, is the Ravens winning by 14 in a game that frankly wasn't as close as the final score. The 49ers did get a garbage time touchdown from Sam Darnold. Brock Purdy was, I think he left the game with an injury. It's not clear what it was, but he was on the sidelines with his helmet on. He was talking to Kyle Shanahan. I think it was a kind of let's protect him / throw in the towel on a game where they were down by 3 scores at the time. So I would guess that's what we saw there, but it's something to keep an eye on for Week 17 if you've been using Brock Purdy. He had 4 interceptions in this one. Sam Darnold had another one. The Ravens are just a really, really good opportunistic defense. Their offense is very good. Their defense even better. All-time bailout game from Gus Edwards, who did score a touchdown, ended up with 31 rushing yards, had 1 catch for 39 yards, only 9 carries. Justice Hill actually had more carries in this one. The game being a blowout probably impacted that, but Gus Edwards not emerging as the RB1, a clear option for the Ravens with Keaton Mitchell out, so that's something else to keep in mind. Before we move on to the Week 17 waiver wire targets, quick run through of the injuries from Sunday and Monday. Trevor Lawrence with a shoulder, not considered serious, but obviously his status for Week 17 up in the air. Brock Purdy, like I mentioned, probably more of a keeping him safe rather than a serious injury, but we'll keep an eye on that one. Isaiah Pacheco left Monday with that concussion, putting his status for Week 17 in doubt. A lot of wide receiver injuries again this week. Jalen Waddle has a high ankle sprain-ish is the way Mike McDaniel made it sound, but we'll just assume it's a high ankle sprain. And makes it very, very unlikely that Jalen Waddle is going to play in Week 17, unfortunately. DJ Moore left that game on Sunday with a leg injury. Not clear what the extent of that is because he was able to play through it for an extent. Jordan Addison has an ankle injury, not considered serious, but could keep him out. Cortland Sutton, a concussion. He'll have to clear the concussion protocol. And then the Packers just continue to be really beat up at wide receiver. Dontavian Wicks left that game with a chest injury, so we'll watch that one throughout the week. TJ Hawkinson, this is the one that could be serious. It sounds like there's a chance that TJ Hawkinson's knee injury is a season ender, so we'll keep an eye on that. Not really sure I'd want to use Josh Oliver from the Vikings, but you might need a replacement option at tight end, so we'll talk about some of those throughout the week. Cole Kmet also left with a knee injury, was having a big game, over 100 yards before that on Sunday, so we got some tight ends to replace. Unfortunately, not a lot of good options. Jamie Eisenberg's top waiver wire options. We'll talk about that on the full episode of Fantasy Football today on Tuesday morning. But right now, his top options heading into Week 17 are Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Zamir White, who I think, those two guys and Khalil Herbert are probably all pretty similar, where you're hoping for 12 to 15 carries, maybe a couple catches. You really need them all to get into the end zone to feel good about starting them. And worth keeping in mind with Zamir White, he actually had a really good game on Sunday. He had 81 yards and no catches, no touchdowns, entering the final drive before picking up 60-plus yards on the final drive. So he did some stat padding while they were closing the game out. And, hey, it was a competitive series. I'm not saying it was garbage time. It was very close to not being a great game for Zamir White. I still think he's a touchdown or bust RB2/3 moving forward. Same with CEH, same with Khalil Herbert. Couple of wide receivers if you need injury replacements. Rashid Shaheed did have a very nice game over the weekend, so that's someone who we've seen upside from him. With Michael Thomas out, he's been used more in a possession-type role rather than just the big play guy, so hopefully that continues. And the DJ Shark had a very good game this week for the Panthers. He made some plays, had 2 touchdowns, so could be someone if you're desperate at wide receiver. And that's going to do it for FFT and 5. We'll see you tomorrow.